Hello my lovely students, welcome to this video explaining Odyssey Book 10 episodes 1 and 2, and hopefully you've watched my other videos on Book 9. So we're going to dive straight into Book 10. Odysseus continues as narrator. So don't forget, these are his words through the poet Homer. He says we next came to the floating island of Aeolia, the home of Aeolus, son of Hippotas, favourite of the gods. And he's saying all of this in hindsight. He does not know that that's what the island is when he arrives at it. He explains that this island immediately looks very odd. All around the isle there runs an unbroken wall of bronze, and below it the cliffs rise sheer from the sea. This is at first a rather inhospitable island, almost like a floating citadel. Aeolus shares his home with his family of 12, 6 daughters that he was given to his 6 sons in marriage. Now that's also slightly shonky. Incest is a divine ability. There are no consequences for the immortals to marry their brothers and sisters. Zeus is married to his sister Hera, for example. Aeolus is not a god, and people often get confused about this. He is the king of the winds, having been given this ability by Zeus, but he's not a god. But this incest between his sons and daughters is one of the first signs that he is very much loved by the gods, and they've given him these extraordinary powers. With their father and estimable mother, they are always feasting. Countless delicacies appear before them, and all day long the house is filled with the smell of roasted meat. This is also something that shows that they are beloved by the gods. They don't have to do any work. They just eat delicious foods all day, and considering meat was normally only eaten after a sacrifice, this is utter luxury. The courtyard echoes with their feasting. At night they sleep each with their loving wife in ornate beds with plenty of rugs. Again, total luxury. And this all suggests Odysseus receives good Xenia from Aeolus, just like he's currently getting from the Phaeacians. And they're not going to be blind to that comparison, the Phaeacians who are listening to him tell this story, and they're going to appreciate it. For a whole month, Aeolus gave us hospitality and questioned me on everything. And you can just imagine Aeolus going, tell me more about Troy, and Odysseus explaining how it all began. When it was my turn, I asked if I might now continue my journey with his help. He gave it willingly. So this is the transactional nature of Xenia. He, Odysseus, as a guest, has been treated very well by Aeolus, and he's sort of paid him back with these lovely stories. He's now able to ask Aeolus for a different favour, and Aeolus is able to help him. And the way he helps him is in giving Odysseus a leather bag made from the skill of a full-grown ox, so it's a really big bag, into which he had forced the energy of the winds. Zeus had given him the power to control them. He stowed it in the hold of my ship, securing it from the possibility of any leakage with burnished silver wire. So there's now this enormous bag, which looks really full, in the hold of Odysseus's ship, the leader of the fleet. And Aeolus has put it there, and it's got all the winds inside, except for one wind. He called up a gentle breeze from the west, so Zephyrus, the wind that is needed to get home, isn't inside the bag. No boisterous winds to blow them off course. That is the point of the bag. But, says Odysseus, his measures were doomed to fail. Right, so Odysseus is giving us some foreshadowing here. So us and the Phaeacians are going, oh no, what could possibly have happened? We came to grief through our own senseless stupidity, says Odysseus. So he explains what happened. For 9 days and nights we sailed. I handled my ship myself without a break. So he is the one steering to make sure they get home. All the other ships are following. On the 10th day, again, groups of 9, followed by another one, we were in sight of our homeland. They're so close. I was so exhausted, I fell asleep. This is the epitome of being lulled into a false sense of security. He can literally see his home. What could possibly go wrong, right? The crew began to talk. I hear it's gold, I hear it's silver. It's not fair. Our captain is valued at every port. He comes home from Troy with a splendid haul of plunder, though we have empty hands. And now Aeolus has given him this as a guest gift. Let's open it. Now, the men are being very selfish and greedy, because we have been told throughout the text, and if you watch the Book 9 video, you'll see this, that every time there is any plunder, Odysseus has shared it out equally. So they have got stuff to take home with them. So this is their own senseless stupidity. And of course, as they open the bag, all the winds are let out. And what happens when you have all the winds blowing at the same time? You have chaos, is what you have. When I awoke, says Odysseus, my spirit failed me. I debated whether to jump overboard or stay with the living and endure. He literally considers just giving up right then and there and jumping in and dying in the sea. But instead, I endured. Long-suffering Odysseus, remember, that's one of his epithets. I covered my head with my cloak and lay as we were driven back to Aeolia. So this is the tragedy of the situation, the fatal flaw in a way of the men is their greed, and they are pushed right back to where they were before. As soon as we had had something to eat and drink, I took some comrades to see Aeolus. We sat on the threshold by the doorposts. So he goes back to Aeolus's house and he sits in the porch where guests normally wait to be seen. And when Aeolus sees him, he says, Odysseus, what are you doing here? What evil has done this to you? We did our best to help you. Aeolus is utterly shocked. It was a foolproof plan, right? There is no reason why Aeolus should see Odysseus at his door again. And Odysseus again asks him for help. He explains an untrustworthy crew and a fatal sleep was what has done this to us. But things could be put right for me. You could do so easily. Yeah, Aeolus is no longer as forthcoming with Xenia as he was before, and instead he says, get off this island immediately. In the world there is no one more damnable than you. It is not right for me to entertain or help you when you are so hated by the blessed gods. Your return like this proves that they detest you. Now I've drawn Aeolus looking away, but you can also imagine Aeolus looking around, maybe at the sky. Is Zeus watching me right now? Aeolus's position is so precariously dependent on the gods that he knows to help Odysseus now, when clearly the gods must have been the ones to stop him from getting home at this point, would ruin Aeolus. So Odysseus is still shown to be important. The gods care enough not to help him, but Aeolus is right to be worried, and he throws Odysseus out of the palace. Thus he dismissed me, causing me deep distress. Poor old Odysseus at this point must be feeling that there is nothing he can do right. They came so close to home. It's like if you've written an entire document and you forget to save it and suddenly your computer crashes and it deletes it and you're thinking, do I have the ability to start this essay again? But for Odysseus it's even worse. It's his home. We left the island and went on our way in a state of gloom, with all the heart taken out of my men by the harsh rowing. But it was our own stupidity that deprived us of the winds. He's reminding us, and the Phaeacians watching him, that they are to be pitied, but it's mostly his men, right? Feel pathos for us, please. Feel pity for us, please. But, So we move on to episode 2, the Laestrygonians. And again, Odysseus says all of this next bit in hindsight. He does not know that is the island to which they have come when they arrive. He only knows it after what happens. For 6 days and nights we sailed, and on the 7th day, multiple of 3 plus 1, we came to Telepilus, Lamus's stronghold in the Laestrygonian lands. In this land, nightfall and morning tread so closely on each other's heels that a man with no need for sleep could earn 2 wages. So this possibly means this is the far, far north. There was a postulated people called the Hyperboreans up in that far distant area. It might even have been where Hercules chased the Ceryneian hind. But the idea is that this is like off the map again. This is a weird place, so we don't really know where it might be. It might not be that far off at all, and this just might be an interesting story that Homer might have heard or made up. Here we found an excellent harbour, closed in on all sides by an unbroken ring of cliffs with 2 jutting headlands. Now I want you to note the shape of this harbour, which I've attempted to draw here. This is what we call a rat trap, right? It's got one way in, lots of space, lots of ships could go in one by one, but they can't all get out fast. It's going to be one in, one out. And so all my captains steered into this harbour. That's natural. You would go through and dock in a lovely sheltered harbour. Plus this looks, very natural. It doesn't look like a trap. Odysseus isn't saying here that he thought it was a bad idea when he says, I did not follow, because he is being a leader. Instead, he says, I brought my ship to rest outside the harbour, made her fast to a rock with a cable, and climbed the headland to get a view of the surrounding land. So he immediately, whenever they reach a new island, finds a high place to go and look around and see what he can see. Is it inhabited, for example? What are they going to find there? He's just doing what he always does. But no cultivated lands could I see, just a plume of smoke. Now, keep an eye on this. He doesn't see any signs of cultivation, meaning there's no farming going on and there don't appear to be any livestock penned. Now, this could mean barbarians. And certainly, to an ancient Greek of his ilk and the later Greeks who would be listening to this story, this doesn't sound good. There's smoke, but there's nothing else to suggest civilization. And I use that word very carefully. To them, that's what they are. Everyone else is, say, barbarian. My scout party, who he has sent out, he always sends a scout party, that's just sensible, found a well-worn track. So obviously that means people are there. And came across a strong girl drawing water from a bubbling stream. This is another red flag. Just like the smoke, but no cultivation. A strong girl? Why is she visibly strong? And why is she out alone? Girls don't go outside. Girls stay indoors and do indoor jobs. Regular Greek women, they don't go out alone. They barely leave the house in the classical period, it seems, and they have their own things that they do. When they went up and asked who the ruler was and what the people were called, she pointed to the high roof of her father's dwelling. She doesn't speak. That's also a red flag. Now, when Odysseus arrived at the land of the Phaeacians, he also met a young girl, but this was Athene in disguise, and she was the total opposite of this young girl. So we have that to contrast in the text. When they entered the palace, they were confronted by Antiphates' wife. Odysseus only knows about Antiphates in hindsight, but this is what he is describing. A woman of mountainous proportions. We might think this is a bit fat-phobic, but this is unusual at that time. Their diets are really healthy and they're outdoorsy people. There's not a lot of indoorsy stuff to do. So people gaining weight could be quite unusual. And a woman of mountainous proportions suggests that she eats something that regular people don't, right? So I've included some hints in the visuals of this. There are skulls all around her throne. Homer does not mention that, but it's a hint to what is about to happen. She called to her husband, Antiphates, who came from the assembly place and immediately made his intentions clear by pouncing on one of my men to eat him. Nom nom nom. Right, so they are cannibalistic humans, it seems. The other two we've fled to the ships. Meanwhile, Antiphates raised a cry throughout the town, bringing more giant-like Laestrygonians running up. They pelted my fleet with lumps of rock that normal men couldn't lift. The cries of men could be heard above the splintering of wood. Now I've drawn him kind of holding himself and shuddering because this is so bizarre and supernatural, and the people that his scouts have met seem to grow and grow as he describes the story. First it's a woman on the throne on mountainous proportions, then it's a huge man coming through and just eating the leg of one of his men, and then we have enormous giants picking up enormous rocks, just like the Cyclops did in book 9. They seem to grow with the telling until they are carrying off his men like fishes on a spear to make their loathsome meal. So they've become full-on giants by this point. Imagine you are Odysseus. You've been looking up at the headland. Your ship is outside. You've sent off some scouts to run back, but before they've even made it back, you start to hear the splintering sound of ships being crushed and the screams of men. While this massacre was happening in the harbour, I drew my sword and slashed the cable holding my blue-prowed ship and shouted to the crew to bend to their oars if they wished to save their lives. I've added, "Row, you fools," because that's what I imagine he might be saying. So this image of the massacre happening in the harbour comes actually from a late 1st century BC wall painting. So this also shows the Laestrygonians as giant. But this gives you an idea. They can't all get out of the harbour at once. They're stuck and the Laestrygonians are on them. They're shooting fish in a barrel. It's really easy for the Laestrygonians to come on them. Poor old Odysseus is really just not able to make any other decision but to abandon them. He could not do anything else if he wanted to save the people on his ship moored outside. With the fear of death on them, my men struck the water like one man. They're all perfectly organised in fear. My ship was safe, but that was the end of all the rest. And he's just imagining what was happening to all his other men. Oh, he shed a tear. Episode 3 is Circe, and as he explains, we came to the island of Aeolus, the home of the beautiful Circe, a formidable goddess with a mortal's woman's voice. Presumably this means all men can hear her, not just heroes, because gods can control who hears them. Or it could mean that she is different to the other goddesses. Maybe this is why she lives alone on an island. But that is for a future video, because just like Book 9, Episode 3 is much, much longer than the first and second episodes. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to know when I add the next video, and have a look at all the other videos that may well help you in your studies of the Odyssey and beyond.